Hi, I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media, and I am here with Don Edwards. He is Worldwide Tech Leader Identity at Amazon Web Services. Don, thanks for being here. Give me a little bit of a sense of some of the challenges that users often experience in some of these very complex cloud environments with multiple projects.
So one of the important things for customers to think about is how they're going to organize their AWS accounts. And we recently published a white paper that actually gives some prescriptive guidance around what a multiple account organization structure should look like. For example, you might want to have a vertical of accounts that are for security purposes and very limited access to those accounts. All of your logs and everything like that and analysis tools go into those security related accounts. Those would be kept separate from your development accounts, which tend to have more loose identity and access management policies. And those would be kept separately, of course, from your production accounts, which again would have very strict rules around who can access what.
All right. So, from your own observations and experience, perhaps you can impart a few lessons onto some of our viewers here about how they can be better users. What are some of the policies that they may want to employ to ensure that they are being more secure, so that they avoid some of the more novice mistakes for somebody who may not be familiarized with all of the secure options that are available to them.
So I think the first place to start is with multi-factor authentication. It's absolutely essential, and it's so easy these days to deploy multi-factor authentication, especially on your highly privileged accounts, like for example the root accounts that have full access to all your resources. Typically, you want to have those root accounts be kept as kind of a break glass sort of account where very few people have access even to get their credentials. And ideally, you have one person who has, say, the password and another person who has access to the multi-factor authentication device so that you can really restrict access. There's a couple of different models around that, depending on how you want to have that break glass done. But that's something you need to pay a lot of attention to for sure. So that's where I would start. And then the other thing is, and I think we can all do better at this, uh, we you want to treat least privilege as a journey, right? So you want to start off with the policies that you think are least privilege, and then continuously analyze them to make sure that the reality meets the reality of the usage is the same as the what the policies actually allow. And one of the things we have for that is AWS Access Analyzer. It uses a technology called automated reasoning to really kind of examine not just the policy itself, but how some of the policies interact, so that you can get a really good picture of what your overall security positioning is. And you can even click a button and have it generate a sample policy based on historical usage of that particular set of policies.
Also, do you have any advice for those watching regarding proper password and credential management related to identities and just making sure that wherever you have those stored, they're not in publicly accessible spaces where perhaps the wrong actor could find them if they're looking hard enough?
So the best password is one that you don't have to use at all. And so if you're deploying applications within AWS, definitely the best way to approach that for resources that resources that need to access the AWS APIs. Um, instead of giving credentials, long-term credentials to do that, it's a better practice to use a role that's associated with either the EC2 instance or the Lambda function or whatever that compute function is, and assign the rights to that role. And that allows your software to get temporary credentials with a limited time period that they're valid, and you can really kind of restrict down on almost on a per call basis what the access is really allowed. So then you don't have to worry about password management at all. Now, there are, of course, occasions where you have resources deployed outside of the AWS environment, and so you have to have some kind of long-term credential. The better way to deal with that is to have that long-term credential stored in something like AWS Secrets Manager, and never in a config file, never in a file in your laptop or anything like that. But generally, just try to avoid having those passwords at all.
AWS has 6 different types of policies that it supports, including identity based policies. So, what are some of the reasons or the strategies behind employing an identity based policy?
Sure. So, like an identity-based policy, the object there is if you have a user that or a group of users, ideally, you know that they will have they need to have access to a certain set of resources. This is your standard kind of role-based access control. That those are the types of policies you apply to those groups of users, and you can supplement that central IT in particular, or central security groups in particular, will really love this. You can build guardrails so that from the organization level, so from your entire estate of accounts, you can set limits on what those policies are allowed to provision. So, for example, you can create a service control policy that, so let's say, prohibits your developers from using a particular set of services that your security group hasn't fully vetted yet or hasn't developed standardized practices around. And you can use those service control policies so that no matter what policy gets applied to the identities in those particular accounts, those permissions are not actually taking effect because the service control policy limits that as a guardrail. Now, there are, of course, occasions where you have resources deployed outside of the AWS environment, and so you have to have some kind of long-term credential. The better way to deal with that is to have that long-term credential stored in something like AWS Secrets Manager, and never in a config file, never in a file in your laptop or anything like that. But generally, just try to avoid having those passwords at all.
Also, there are a number of different ways that you can group your various employees to give them certain access or permission to projects. There can be role based access. You can do access according to attributes. There are a number of different strategies for how you want to do it. How does an organization best determine what methodology through which they want to group their employees for various levels of permission and access?
So I think the first thing to do is to take a kind of a step back and holistically look at what you're trying to provision access to and your administrative procedures around that management. If you have groups of users who always use the same set of resources all the time, then maybe a role-based access control method would work best. If you have maybe more of a dynamic environment where you have people, say developers, creating assets that they want to keep, they want to kind of control, who has access to those. Then you can use an attribute-based access control system, so that on a per file basis or per object basis or other types of resource, you can apply these attributes and say anybody who is in this project, they have access to these environments.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Don. Once again, this is Don Edwards, Worldwide Tech Leader of Identity at Amazon Web Services, or AWS. I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media. Until next time, have a safe day online.